how to weave in your ends. I have two ends here on this shawl which I have not weaved in, and you can tell I've been wearing it. It's stretched in the shape of the knot that I wear it in all the time. I'm going to show you two different methods. The one is crocheting it in, and the other one is going to be sewn in. So crocheting it in first. So you have your end here, and you want to weave it back in either through the crochet stitches up here or through the bottom of the stitches where the posts go around in that stitch. So I'm going to show you both of those things as I work this in. So that is where the knot is at the end there. To start with, I'll pull it straight in here and give it a little tug so that that knot sits in line with the edge of the crochet edging there and the knitted edge here, and it just kind of will disappear. Now I want to immediately go into a stitch so that it's held taut. This is a nice big loop, so push my hook through the loop and just work that thread through. And again, give it a little tug till the knot disappears. Now these posts for the bottom of each stitch, I'm going to work the thread through those. So I'll hook it underneath those two, hook it underneath those two of that stitch, and so I have the bottom of those two stitches on my hook, and I'm just going to pull that through. It does sometimes take a little bit of wiggling, and I often give it a little tug as you work it, just so that the thread that you're weaving in, you can see how it's going to look as the fabric moves and stretches, and so that it's actually sitting in properly and you don't end up with big floats where the thread is just, or the yarn is just going straight across between big gaps. Like this gap here, between that crochet stitch and that crochet stitch, that's too big. I would have to hook it underneath this, or this one here, or even down in this bit here. It doesn't really matter in a lot of ways where you thread it. You're just trying to make it kind of disappear in the weave of your knitting or crochet or whatever it is. You can use this for both. And so you just keep choosing stitches that feel like they're close enough that you're going to have that yarn end disappear, but far enough that it's still going to keep traveling along. And just keep working your way along. You can do multiple stitches at the same time. I have been known to do a hole all the way up to here on my hook at the same time, whatever you're comfortable with. And you just work your way along like so until you've got a couple of inches woven in. Now, if you don't have scissors on you and you're wanting to weave this in entirely, that is long enough that has been woven in that you don't actually need to weave in more. But if you don't have scissors and you're not wanting to have that tail dangling out until you find scissors, what I like to do is go through a whole number of them at the same time. Like that. And then halve that length of the yarn. So that's about half. Pull it through that loop, and then you pull that loop. It is often a little bit tight through all of those stitches. You need to keep pulling on that loop so that as you turn your hook like this, you can see I'm doing this, that allows it to free itself from the surrounding stitches while still keeping the yarn that you're wanting to weave in through. You do that, and then same thing, pull it out, make sure that end isn't visible, just tuggy tug, and do that again with the loop again. Sometimes once is enough, sometimes you need to do it a couple of times. think I've lost it. Yep. Pull it back out. Go in, in, in. There we go. It's a nice little weavy path. Now I'm seeing flashes of the hook as I go twisty twist, and I can see that black across the hook that tells me I've still got that loop where I want it. Before I let go, I'm just going to even it out across the stitches, and then there you go, it disappears. I've got another yarn end there that I need to weave in. There, all gone, disappeared. So that's the crochet method of weaving in your ends. Now to sew it in. To sew it in, you need a wool needle. It needs to be big enough to fit that thread. I might actually need my big one. I will check. There it is. So I have a couple of wool needles here. And I have this one. So there's a whole different range of types of wool needles that you can get. You can get ones like this that have got a pointy-ish but still blunt tip, and ones that have got a completely blunt tip, like this one. I don't want to use that one today. I'll try with a smaller one. It is always best to choose a needle that fits your yarn the most perfectly. So that one does, so I won't be using the bigger one today. Now, you thread your needle. In some ways this is easier. I just often don't have a needle with me when I'm sewing in the ends. And so it ends up just being the crochet hook that I used for the project is what I use to weave in my ends with. You're basically doing the same thing, except it's attached through here. So instead of it being through the hook, I'm needing to make sure that it doesn't come out of the hook. It's in the yarn needle. So in a lot of ways this is easier. And you just thread it through. This is really easy because I've got a whole string of stitches that have been worked into this chain loop, and so I can just run my needle straight along on the inside of all those stitches. As you can see, it's not visible on either side, and so I can just run my needle straight through all of those, give it a little tug so the knot disappears, and that's entirely disappeared, eaten up by all those stitches. Now I will show you the weaving it through here. You just find stitches. If you've got a whole series of chains you're wanting to put it through, it's best to kind of go in the open bits of the chains like this and just weave it through. Just weave it through. If you want to, you can mirror the crochet stitches. That does require more effort, so I tend to not do that. But you can go, okay, so this one goes up and around and in there, and go like this, and then go back down and through here, and just mirror the crochet stitches, which absolutely works. And then when you're done and you feel that you've weaved it in enough, you can just snip it off. Weaved in enough is anywhere between ideally 2 to 3 inches. The larger the gauge of thread, I often do a little bit more that you're weaving in. So with very, very fine lace, like this sort of lace, if I've weaved in, you know, say I'm weaving in across here, if I've weaved in that much, that would be sufficient to secure it because it's going through all of those stitches. Whereas at this gauge, for this crochet edging, the equivalent of that number of stitches here is like that much. So you just got to kind of scale it up, and you're wanting it to be secured by a couple of dozen stitches. And you just go through. You can do the same thing if you're wanting to weave this in all the way to the end without chopping it. You can absolutely do that as well. You just keep going through and through, holding it now by the point of your tapestry needle or your wool needle, whichever it is. You just keep going through stitches. You want to go through a few more so that you end up with the stitches kind of piling up on the needle a bit. This, piling up. And I want to go through that one there. Piling up. See how they're all piling up so much on there? And you push it all the way through, and you see that tail is just about to come out. And you pull it through, and you give it a tug. And can you see the tail? The tail just there. And as I tug that, that tail disappears. And you're done. Your ends are woven in. You cannot see where those edges are. They entirely disappear.